Hello, this is Hilgard Lamprecht. I'm the proud leader of the LifeWealth group, and this is our podcast where I get the great opportunity to invite some of my good friends, some clients, some folks I've been done life with that has been very intentional in using their time, talent, and treasure to make a profound impact in their communities as well as in their families. And today my special guest is Kevin Respress. And Kevin has been a good friend. I think we've done life together for at least five years, I believe.
Yep.
Or more.
Feels like more.
Yeah. And we've had breakfast for a long time, pretty much once a month. And I got to know Kevin very, very well. So Kevin, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the couch.
Thank you.
You know, I do think about who I invite specifically for this podcast, something significant about every person's life. And let me just introduce you first and tell you who Kevin is. Kevin is the head of C12 for Central Florida. Kevin, you have 4 groups?
CEO groups have 4 and 2 key players, so I have 5 total. Yeah.
5 total groups. Yep. And C12, share a little bit about who is C12?
C12 is a Christian CEO roundtable group that's been around about 30 years, and God allowed me to take part in that about 15 years ago here in Central Florida. So a bunch of Hilgarts sitting around a table for a full day every month to try to make an impact through their business by being profitable, but also making an eternal impact through their company. So business as a ministry is our tagline.
Mm-hmm. And I've been blessed greatly myself just being part of the program. I think I'm on my 4th or 5th year.
Yep.
Material is absolutely fantastic. Kevin is a fantastic leader, brings a lot of humor to our group, stories, great family, and we get a great opportunity just to pray for one another too during our time together. So, hey, you know, you were cruising along in life. You were kind of hitting your 40s here.
Yep.
Working with a very successful company called Cargill.
Yep.
In your town and in your area, right? You originally in Polk County, right?
Yep, Southeast Polk.
So Southeast Polk County. And life was grand and good. And we were joking a little bit earlier and said, who the heck jumps out of a perfectly healthy plane that's flying with a parachute on? And here at 42, halfway through life, you decided to make a jump.
I did.
So tell us a little bit about what was causing that jump, and you're now 15 years removed from the jump, and so you have an opportunity to reflect a little bit back from it. But what happened here in your 40s?
Well, I would probably say that, it's a lot better to jump out of an airplane with a parachute than without one. And I said earlier, when you jump out of a plane for God, you bounce. It doesn't kill you. It hurts really bad. But, I started with Procter & Gamble in the early 90s, late 80s, just because I needed a job and I thought a big company would provide security. Cargill purchased us, and I didn't know who Cargill was at the time, but they were a large company. So I was very blessed to spend almost 20 years making orange juice. All that to say, around 2000, I had what I call a God encounter. I would say a Saul to Paul or Paul to Saul. Anyway, it was at a moment where this epiphany of there is a creator and I am created and there is a purpose. So that was on a weekend, a Walk to Emmaus weekend, and it was me and God. All that to say, I left there with this challenge of if God is real, what does that mean for me? So I went on this God-chasing journey of about 4 or 5 years, and it was in 2005 when my dad passed, and I was there beside him when he breathed his last breath, that something happened that I just said, everything I'm doing is not really that important when you breathe your last breath. Why am I working so hard? Is this it? They're going to say he was a good guy and close the lid on a casket, and that's it. And it felt like I was doing a lot for nothing. And so that was around 2005. And I began to search for significance over success and didn't know what that looked like. And I knew God was calling me out of that world, and I knew that I had to do something significant. And Citrus was at its prime in 2008, 2009, and our corporation decided to sell that division and offer me several options for relocation. And I knew it was God's way of saying, here's your door. Take the package, take whatever, and go do it. I think my family thought I was having a midlife crisis. My wife was packing, ready to move. We could go to Colorado, Utah, expat. I could go anywhere in the world. Cargill's a big company. And I could hear this voice going, you got to do something significant. And what better place than where you've taken your whole entire life, Polk County, born and raised there. You think I'm going to let you just abandon ship in Central Florida and go somewhere else. And it was a search for significance is what I was on. And I had no idea what I was doing. And left that career and started a consulting company, and just about starved to death my first year or two, and literally saw a C12 ad in an Inc. magazine that said building great businesses for a greater purpose. Called him on the phone, was introduced to this CEO roundtable model. Jesus thought it was a good idea to hang out with 12 people. Let's try it. And I really, for the first time in my life, I saw the value of community, wisdom, wise counsel, correction, and it all happened in a setting of 12 business leaders, and that's where I got my start. So 15 years, that's all I've been doing, and absolutely love what I get to do for a living.
So let me go back here to your experience. So at 40, would you say that you at that point in time in life experienced success, or your definition of success? Did you taste success?
Absolutely, but I tasted what I thought was success because I was probably through too much TV or other things convinced that success was probably money or title. Mm-hmm. And so when I tell people I'm an uneducated, I dropped out of college, and I said, show me the rules of the game and I'll show you how to win. And so for me, it was, how do I get a title, a promotion, or a pay raise? And so my whole life was about those two. And no matter how much I moved up the ladder, I don't know that what I thought was success left me pretty empty and void. And as you know, Ben, to get there, most men were workaholics. And so, 80-hour a week, never coming home, sacrifice a lot of relationship with my children, marriage. Yeah, it was seeing my dad going, here's a guy who did everything he could to be, quote, successful. And what difference did it make? And what's the impact? And what's left? Not a whole lot. I just didn't want to be that guy. And so I remember telling my wife, I would rather try this experiment to make a difference and fail and have my grandchildren or great-grandchildren telling stories about their crazy Papa Kevin who went out and tried to be Johnny Appleseed than to live a conservative another 20 years or 30 years and die, and them to say, so what? He made a little money, made a little title. So yeah, it was definitely, I wanted to, and two, my convictions of trying to restore things in my family lineage. I did not have a lot of great examples, so I didn't know what I didn't know. But whether it was debt or whether it was integrity or whether it was, those things didn't come natural in my family line. So it was like, how are my children ever going to be different unless something changes? But yes, I told my wife, she backed me, go try it. Now, there was a time when she's like, are you sure? And I think the whole family, my mother-in-law, God rest her, we were great friends, looked at me one time and said, this midlife crisis, is it about over? Are you ready to go back to work and get a real job with benefits? And I said, I don't think so. She said, I hope you really are hearing from God, because there was a draw to go back to the normal.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about that. It seems like when you go through this transition, and you're describing a little bit of a desert experience.
Absolutely.
And a testing of your resolve, if you would. But tell us a little bit about that.
So not running into C12 immediately, I'd started this consulting company, and at that time, if you remember, real estate was really hot in the late 2000s, and so I thought if I just put all my wealth into commercial real estate and create this experiment around Christian businesses all being under one roof, shared service, everyone, much like your place here, a lot of Christians working together for a common cause. So I spent everything I had on real estate, and I tell people I can turn $1 million into about $249,000 in less than 3 years. And, so that investment, and so I left going, God, I know I heard you tell me to leave what I was doing. I know I'm challenged to do something significant, but it's not working. And so I call it my fetal position moment. I think till a man, the Bible says, pick up your cross and follow me. If you hadn't been to the cross, don't dodge it, just lay down. Take the nails, get it over with. So I had to die on the bedroom floor in terms of Kevin had to go away. It was at that point God began to rebuild me through brokenness. But yeah, it was a desert season. One thing God, I felt like, not audibly, but in my time of seeking Him, had told me is the risk in leaving any industry or anything that is been, quote, successful in terms of men's eyes is when you get desperate, it's easy to go back. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling like one of the things when I left and voluntarily kind of walked was, you can't go back. You can't be that washed up consultant to your industry. You can't be a salesman of used equipment. And I made that commitment. And sure enough, when we got, it was a dark time financially, and I would start paying bills until we ran out of money, and then I would just close the checkbook and come back another day. God honored that. I don't know how it happened, but in the middle of that sequence of events, I got a phone call for a job offer in the citrus industry, and I won't name names, that was too good to be true. And I made the mistake of setting up a meeting. I can tell you right where I was sitting, and the whole time I'm thinking, why am I sitting here even entertaining this when I know God told me to run away from that? Mm-hmm. And it was a large, recognizable, publicly traded company, and the deal just got better. And I left saying, I don't think so, not for me. And a phone call came later and said, we really think you're the guy for this, to take this project on. What would it take to recruit you? And I said, I don't think you have anything. And they said, tell us what you want. I said, there's nothing, I can't do it. And they said, we're going to think about it, talk to your wife, we're going to pick you up Friday, would like to drive you down to South Florida and have a meeting.
Wow.
He said to me, what would you like in the back seat of that limo when it shows up? And a fear came over me that if I didn't close the door on that, I would be trapped. And I said, there's nothing you can put in that car that's going to convince me, and please don't call me anymore. And that's when I felt completely alone, and that's when God started showing up. Wow. And it was that weekend that I saw the Inc. magazine. And so it was my test, we all have them, but it was a transition from success to significance that was brought on by wanting to break some generational things of debt and addiction and things in my family that I realized if I don't draw a line and do something different, my grandchildren or great-grandchildren are going to be no different than me. They're going to be living with the curses of their forefathers. So to me, it's about setting things in order for my children and my children's children.
That is a brave story. As you are mentioning this, I think I've shared with you the 5 phases of life. We all start out in survival, and then we go to stability, and then we're looking for success. And then when we get to the success and we experience success, our definitions of it, then we find the emptiness, or there must be something beyond success.
That's right.
And we move towards significance. But on our way, your story is a story of describing what it means to be surrendered. And I have had the privilege of hearing many people's stories, and my own story really resonates with yours. So I'm going to start thinking that I think this is the way to significance, is to get to a spot of complete surrender, where we are open enough to hear from God, to speak to us in our unique way, in His unique way for us, but to a certainty that you heard.
Right.
Even in the face of dealing with family who is questioning you, good-hearted family and friends, and maybe sometimes even a spouse, questioning your resolve or your thinking, because it's kind of weird to hear from God. People would joke and say, did you hear the God speak from heaven? Some people do, right?
That's right.
But most people don't. It's inside, the Holy Spirit inside, that is saying to us there's more that He has for us than our own pursuit towards our own kingdoms versions of success. It does take a resolve. It does take a faith. And it seems unfair. I don't know about you, but it seems unfair, because there's not 100 people behind you standing in line to leave the comforts of a corporate job to go do something more significant than what that might look like for them. And then the first step to be the desert experience, or the surrendering experience.
Well, and I had doubts, right? And so I remember during that season, so I can't answer this. I don't know if God gives everyone that call and they refuse it. And my dad always said, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough, right? And I was never a smart kid, so I figure I better be tough. In this case, I don't know that God doesn't give everyone an opportunity. I use a tagline a lot with people: don't miss your crucifixion. I had many opportunities to the story I told you, the job offer. There was many times I could have found an easy, and I think that the enemy's temptation is being success. I literally did not feel like I was going to go to hell if I went back to work or stayed at my job, but I felt like I'd have just missed such a great opportunity to make an impact. But I remember saying I could keep doing what I'm doing and probably die and be okay and make it into heaven, maybe by the skin of my teeth, or I could be a champion and run through and bust the tape of heaven wide open going, I'm here, I made it, but I'm missing an arm and a leg. But man, I left some destruction to darkness back whence I came. And so I said, I'd rather be the guy running the race wide open than to just sit by and be a spectator. I was never that person. But yeah, I don't know. I know a lot of people that I think have been to the point of crucifixion. You know, even Jesus, I think he could have at any point walked away. He chose. He said, not my will, but yours. But he could have got up. And so I tell people, when you hear the hammer and nails and they're laying you down, just go ahead and be a dead guy. Just be dead to yourself. And then it says, and Christ lives in us. So let him live through you. But man, it's hard. You know, men are tough. We'll hold on for me, everywhere we get. And so there again, I don't think it was anything I did any more significant than you or anyone. I think it was just this get up every day and go, okay, we're going to try this again.
So the concept of what we are communicating here is a lot being a good, I would say the best version of you stewarding your time, talent, and treasure. So these are big words, but you know, talent for the most part is career, right? So why do I choose career or career path? Or what do I do with that? And it seems like there's a refinement process with most of my friends who are living very significant lives. And now these experiences of coming to mountaintops and going down to valleys, getting refined in the process to even live it out after the message comes as to what I need to pursue.
Right.
You are now 15 years from that experience. Looking back over that 15-year period of time, share with us maybe a few mountaintops and a few valleys that you had to overcome in order to be able to even live it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first few years with CTO for me was very difficult. I mean, it looked like the easiest job in the world, but I struggled. I think I was probably voted least likely to succeed year after year and was embarrassed to go to corporate training events because it wasn't working in terms of selling, recruiting, revenue. But yeah, that's still small voice. So one of the valleys was, you know, the first 5 years was very hard, but it taught me to trust God. It taught me to seek him every day. It taught me to rely not on my own understanding. And it taught me to be diligent, which I always thought was hard work. I mean, I was notorious for working more hours than anyone else because Buck Jacobs, the founder of C12, one time on a phone call with me, asked me if I was being diligent, and I said, yeah, and he said, define it. And I described it as, you know, crushing it 6 days a week, 7 days a week. He said, that's not diligence. That's hard work. Diligence is doing exactly what God told you to do, nothing more, nothing less. Doing more for God that he didn't tell you to do doesn't get you any brownie points. Just do what he told you to do. So I was not doing what he told me in lieu of doing more of what I thought would work, which is a form of disobedience. I had to go back, okay, what do I do? Start with the basics.
Give us that line again. What is diligence?
Diligence is doing exactly what God told you to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Doing more for God than he asked is just as bad as not doing what he told.
Wow.
You know, and there were things I was not doing, and he also said to me, and he said, delayed obedience is disobedience. So if God's telling you to do something, you don't do it now. And you know that, you have children, right? If you tell your kids to do something, they don't do it, that's a form of disobedience. They might say in a minute or when I get ready, but so God taught me a lot through the trial of trusting him. I remember in a literal fetal position one time, I was crying out to God, nothing. Plan A went down, the commercial building. Plan B, my consulting company. Plan C, C12 wasn't working. I'm out of options. You know, A, B, and C are not working. What do I do now? I don't have a D. And it was like God said to me, not in a voice, but in a feeling, finally, there's only one plan, and that's me. And you've put your job, your money, your title, your marriage, you've put everything in front of me. Just put me first, and you get all that stuff back. And so I had to learn how to put God first in my life. And that was, I went to church as a young kid. I knew religion, but I didn't know what putting a relationship with Jesus first was. So The worst time of my life was the best time because it taught me to rely 100. I think the reason, I thank God I'm not an Israelite, right? I think they wandered 40 years. He was teaching that lesson. I mean, come on, it's me, right? Send the rain, send the manna, fire by day, cloud by day, fire by night. He led me through that season, and it was a good time. I'll go back to say, out of that came almost a form of arrogance, that if you weren't a dead guy, if you didn't have a story like mine, then I don't have time to hold your hand through your... And what I realized is it didn't have to be that way. I could have learned a lot of this on the clock, so to speak. I just didn't know what I didn't know. So I look at a lot of what I do. I mean, guys like you are easy. You've already got it. You understand, all this. But a lot of what I do, at least on the prospecting end, is help show business guys that when I was, working in a large company, I had a lot of direct reports, I didn't know that I could be significant there as an employer or a leader. I thought church was on Sunday and work was on Monday. And so we kept those two separate, and no one in all those years, I at one point thought I was having a midlife crisis. Why do I love business and I love Jesus? And everyone I would go to in my Christian realm to say, what do? They'd say, quit and become a pastor. And I'm like, just shoot me, right? A not-for-profit, my brain can't, I invoice, I collect, I don't get, but it's just not, I don't feel that. And I'd go to all my business people and they'd say, look, keep the Jesus. You ever walk in a board meeting and say, guys, I think we should do this because God told me. They're like, Respress, leave the Jesus stuff somewhere else. The numbers say, Barna data, forensic data, financial planner says. It was, so I didn't know what I was missing. I would lay awake at my bed and go, what is wrong with me? I don't know what to do. And there's a man over in Lakeland. He's was in his church at the time and in his school, and I was trying to form the corporation, and I called him and I said, I need to know, am I a not-for-profit or am I a for-profit business? He said, you're neither one. I said, what am I? He said, you're an idiot. He said, I said, that's an understatement. He said, you're trying to define your calling by how you file your income taxes. He said, just go do what you're called to do. He said, if it's that difficult, start a not-for-profit and start a for-profit and see which one has money in the bank account at the end of the year. So I started Empower Ministries and Empower Solutions. And I'd walk in, and whether it was a speaking engagement or whatever I was doing, and I'd kind of fish to see what's acceptable here. And that at the end of the year, there was money in the business account and nothing in the ministry account. And so it was kind of the beginning of this business. In the juice world, I made orange juice. We did blends. We did all kind of, there's a term called emulsification. That's when two components that are not designed to mix together and stay mixed, right? Mayonnaise, butter. There's a lot of, that if you can get it right, it creates a really cool, but there is a process of pressure, homogenization, time and pressure that creates two things that come together as one. For me, it was business and ministry. And through that season, I think God put me in a blender and emulsified the two.
That's very well said.
They're all in the same. They're not. There's not one or the other. They're the same. And I didn't know that for a 20-year career, and no one ever told me. So I feel like a lot of my job, and for anyone listening, is if you're in business and you're a Christian, tag you're it. You don't get an opt-out. You will stand before God and give an account for a portion of the spiritual life of those people that you lead. And you have now been told. You've been put on notice. You've been served. I wish someone had told me that 35 years ago. I think I could have done it without jumping out of the plane. But I didn't know I could. I didn't know I should. And I think what C12 brings is just the how-to, right? But you got to know that first. Yeah. So that's my story.
Well, 15 years later, what was very, I was celebrating with you at the last meeting that we had where you were announcing that we won an award. Tell us about the award that we won.
Yeah, and so C12 is good to give out awards. And now remember, the first 5 years I was embarrassed to go. I walked into the event this year and told my wife, I'm not sure what my God has me here, but it's a different feeling I couldn't put my finger on. Had no idea, but was both in a 15-year anniversary and some business success, was gifted with this year's, we call it a Bema Seat Award. Now, 15 years ago, the other thing old Buck did, and Buck gave me a DVD called The Bema Seat of Christ. I had never heard that phrase. I had to go look the word Bema up. So if you don't know, that's where the judge sit, the big box that you look up to the judge when you're sitting on trial. And it was the scripture that I'd probably read and didn't understand, that I would be held accountable for everything done in word and deed. And I always thought that was salvation. So when I watched this DVD, there is an accountability to God for what you've done with what He's gifted you, the money, the time, the talent, the treasures. And so the award that Central Florida got was the Bema Seat Award, which means that whatever things we measure, chaplaincy, dollars given, people engaged in ministry, we were recognized here in Central Florida as the C12 franchise in the nation that has the highest measure of ministry, which is the best award that you can get, right?
Wonderful.
Because that's the one God's going to, hopefully you're a financial, hopefully my eternal 401k is on the move up, which is more important than my earthly one, although we need both. So yeah, that was it. It's the ministry. And so it's guys like you and others that I get to work with that believe this stuff, and they go do it.
So you're the leader of probably the most intentional group of guys that are making a ministry impact and looking at their platforms, their professions, their business as an opportunity to do ministry. And that must feel good, man. That must feel like the decision of 15 years ago. It's starting to blossom. It's playing out. It's being an inspirational leader in that area and helping others and showing the example.
It feels good, but it's a little, I looked over to Mike Sharrow and said, am I going to die after this? Have I reached that? The other cool story, which just meant more to me and probably not super relative but when Buck challenged me a lot in those first 5 years, and a few other C12 guys, but him as one, he got to close out there and made a great statement. But at the end of that, from the stage, he referenced he said, you guys that are getting your butts kicked out there, you guys that know you're called but you're not doing well, you guys that are having doubts, you just see him get an award, you need to go talk to him. Because I remember when he was a complete train wreck, disaster, and I found myself mobbed with opportunities to give people hope.
Oh, good.
And then after that, he came down out of the audience and he hugged me, and I'm like, I think you asked me one time why I don't just quit. You're not busy. Why? And I remember telling you, Buck, I can't quit. God told me to do this. Fire me. It'd be real easy, but I can't quit. And so that was the highlight, was getting a big hug from Buck at the end of this.
Wow.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not going to die anytime soon. I got a lot of work to do, but it did feel like what's next.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So that's where we sit.
I want to transition a little bit over to family, because you did mention that you wanted to, part of your transition was to focus more on family.
Yep.
And not be the 80-hour week kind of a guy.
Right.
So this way you live your life, has it given you opportunity to be intentional with kids or communicating maybe certain principles or values or things that you believe in? Yeah,
absolutely. And specific to family, obviously community we can talk about, but that's a hard transition. When you've just work, and you spend part of your time building things for the future and part of your time fixing things you messed up in the past. But I do think family legacy and things. I was walking in your office and saw a stack of books up there, and it was something like Die With Nothing.
Yes.
And I thought, I had to look at the cover to see if my dad wrote that, because his joke, and you think I'm funny, my dad was very funny, but he said, son, when I go toes up, it's every family member for themselves, And while that sounds like a curse, it was actually a blessing. There was nothing to fight over. He literally died with nothing. I mean, literally nothing. I think he had $10 in his wallet. Nothing in a savings account, nothing in a checking account, no life insurance. My sister and I had to split the funeral costs, right? And it's not a bad thing. There was nothing to fight over. So why it looked bad, but the point was not that I want to leave a bunch of wealth for my kids. I knew there was something he was missing, and it was just some life integrity thing. So yeah, family-wise, I began to try to restore the name. While my dad was not a bad person, he didn't understand that. He was saved, and thank you, God, after kidney failure and a lot of things, got to meet Jesus, and I get to spend eternity with him in heaven. The grace of God abounds. But, I began more of a personal restoration of the family name and the reputation, and then not being taught that debt was unbiblical. How do you sit in church your whole life, and everyone tells you, get a really good credit score, leverage, borrow all you can, buy a bunch of stuff, and one day it'll be worth something, and realize that's, the true evidence. So, getting out of debt took a while, and then teaching the principles to my children to stay out of debt. and then to begin to model for them what does it look like to give and save and invest while still being diligent to steward the things God's gifted you to do. So probably more of do it first, then teach it, and then try to confirm it. So I'm still working on that now with my children and grandchildren while still trying to make up for a lot of lost years of just work.
I love the fact that you're modeling it. It's phenomenal. That's where it starts. And then if you can back that up with principles and things like that, I think you're doing it phenomenally well. So congratulations on that. You know, two more questions for you. One is finishing strong. What does finishing strong to you look like?
Well, a lot of the family stuff. I mean, seeing all my children and grandchildren walk with God. While I've not done things right in my life, many things wrong. I think of the scripture of Moses where he did not get to set foot in the promised land, but he got to see it. And so finishing strong is before I die to see all my children and grandchildren in that place with God that I think I have found. I can't make that happen. I can't force it out, but I want to see it. My prayer is, God, let me see all my children and grandchildren. Let me see the promised land. 2, to have empowered them with something more than the book on the shelf, die with absolutely nothing, right? Not that I want to leave them anything, but I want to leave them. We live on a lake in Polk County that has some really nice houses, really pristine. I'm not on the water. I have poor man's lakefront. Our community owns one lot. We all share it. But I looked at, my wife and I ride that lake, and most of the people there that own those homes, when I did some research, inherited that from their parents or grandparents. Very few earned it themselves. I don't want to leave my children necessarily I want to leave them better than I was left. And whether that's just absence of debt, or whether that's the principles of investing, or whether that's principles of giving. But yeah, finishing strong to me is to leave my wife secure, to leave before her, because I wouldn't make it without her. Because through all this, I'm telling you, I'm writing a book called God Sounds a Lot Like My Wife. And I look back at all the times he used her and I wouldn't listen. And because I think business people can become arrogant, and because we've been successful in the world's eyes, why would God? And he can speak through a donkey, but my wife, many times I didn't listen. So writing that book to say, yeah, I think my wife who walked with me through all that, never left me, had plenty of reasons to, to leave married to my children's mother and my grandchildren's grandmother, and treat her like Christ says to be treated.
That's finishing strong, right?
And to leave zero debt and something, not necessarily so that they can retire, but so that they can invest in their future. I remember trying to get a loan when I was 18 at a bank to start a business. And the guy laughed at me, and I didn't know what was so humorous. He said, you're 18, you have nothing, and you want to buy a piece of equipment to start an agricultural business. I said, what do I need to do? He said, you need to go earn some money, and you need to own something. I said, if I could earn money and own something, I wouldn't need to borrow money from you. But had someone sat with me and invested in me, so some money for my children to have to go run their own businesses or invest in, and then obviously to leave a legacy of love in the Lord, and how important it is that there is an eternity, there is a God who created a son who died for each one of us, and that without that, you really are not successful no matter what you think. And so leaving that piece behind to me, and a name. I gave my kids a plaque. My son's got the plaque my dad gave me before he died. You've seen it. You can Google it, and it's the one your father gave it to you. It was all he had to give. Now it's yours to keep and cherish for as long as you may live. If you ever tarnish the name, son, it's hard to get back. But the name, something I want that name to be symbolic of the redemption and the restoration of God in a person and in a family.
Powerful, man, powerful. You've defined it very, very well. And by defining it that well, Kevin, you are very clear, and it's making you walk your steps very intentionally, which is very, very powerful. So the clearer you can become about what that all looks like, the easier it is to live that, finishing strong and live that legacy. Thank you so much for joining us and telling your story. I heard some sides of it that I've never heard before.
Well, and thank you. I was just say, sitting in a C12 group with guys like you, I never had mentors. I never had close friends, and I never knew what wise counsel was. And the power of numbers out of the witness of 2 or 3. And so being a part of groups to learn, but two, even what you've taught me around money. I didn't have a financial education. I didn't know about these different strategies to save on taxes and so just being around guys like you, to me, I get 50-yard line seats at bowl games 5 times a month with the smartest, most blessed people. And two, to have people I can call, what would you do here? Can you help my sister? What would you do if you were me? Mm-hmm. I mean, most of us weren't taught that. They didn't teach us. So I thank you for being part of a group and being another one of my South African friends who can challenge, who can give it, but can also take it. There's not a lot of that in the kingdom. Most kingdom guys are pretty weak. So I thank you for being a man of God and being someone who's rough around the edges of time, but you can take more than you can give. So I appreciate your friendship and your commitment to C12 in that group and everybody in their life.
I appreciate that. Well, we talked a lot about life here today, and we did talk about wealth and generational wealth. We talked about how to steward that very, very well, but more so, it's really about our own characters, our own stories, our own relationship with God and how He directs our steps. And then the faith, and I would say the guts to pursue that and to stay on that is essential in your story, Kevin. And then to be able to experience the reward here on this side of heaven as well, of what a life looks like that is very, very well lived. If you'd like to learn more, please go to our website. It's called www.lifewealthgroup.com. We have a lot of information for you there. Also welcome to a copy of my book. You are welcome to get a complimentary copy. In here I'm writing and sharing a lot about what it looks like to plan and succeed in your life wealth, to move from dream to reality. Kevin and I both have experienced a dream of how God gave us a vision for what He has for the future, and we are experiencing the current reality and what it looks to live that out. Some great and some still challenging moments.
Amen.
You know, humble enough to be able to stand on our knees and know that it's not us, but God living through us. But just great resources available for you in your life and your journey. Thanks for joining us here today again. And Kevin, thank you again
for
joining me today.
Appreciate it.